Welcome to Conversations with Corrections, hosted by the Utah Department of Corrections. This occasional podcast features staff, incarcerated individuals, and other stakeholders of the UDC discussing issues that impact corrections, both nationally and within the state of Utah. Here is today's host, Department Spokesman Liam Truchard.
And welcome back, everyone, to Conversations with Corrections. I'm Liam Truchard, and today I'm joined by Steve Gehrke. Steve has an interesting title. It's Director of Operational Excellence. But that doesn't really describe what you do, Steve. Can you give us an explainer of what it is that you do here for the department?
Sure. Well, I appreciate the opportunity to be here and talk with you, Liam. Operational excellence, as you indicated, can be any number of different things. Anything that's going to make us more excellent in what we do can fit under that title. So it's a huge responsibility. It's a huge opportunity, I would say, to make anything that is going to make our system function better and take a part in making that happen. So excellence can be anything from making sure that our staff are supported by better processes, making sure that if they're seeing common themes or trends surface and prevent them from getting their work done, that can fall under excellence, right? So we can do something a little bit better. We can get a little bit closer to excellence. So what I should note is I don't see excellence as it's one of those proverbial things. It's not really a destination. It's the journey, right? Excellence is going to be something we're striving for at all times. I don't have any misgivings that someday we're going to just arrive and sit back and look at this grand landscape that we've just traversed and say, wow, we did it. We got to excellence, right? But it's the process that you really have to enjoy. So excellence can come from staff kind of raising their hands and saying, hey, my job could be easier or my job could be better if only this, right? But how often do we take the time to sit back and really look at what we're doing and look at how we're doing it and say why? Why do we do it this way? What could we do better? What could we do differently? That's where we come in. That's where my newly gained staffer here, Alec, is able to kind of team up with me, and we'll go around and we'll say, if life could be better for you, what would that look like? Don't be afraid to step back and look at your job and look what you do. And, when you go home at the end of the day, what is it that really is still plaguing you? Or what is it that you can look back on and say, man, I really accomplished something today? How can we expand on those achievements and those accomplishments and that feel of pride and that sense of achievement? And how can we minimize those times when you're really just spinning your wheels and chasing your tail and not really getting anywhere? So to me, that's what excellence is. It's about making sure that people have the ability to accomplish those great things that they're here to do. And another angle I should say that we can get those kind of indications from or those kind of signals from is the general public or the loved ones of the incarcerated individuals or supervised individuals who we're trying to help better, right? So we can listen with an open ear, take some candid feedback from them and say, what is it that's really not working for you? What is it that you're hearing constantly that's just not working? And we can take a pulse of that and we can say, okay, let's sit down together, look at the process, look at the system as a whole, and say, what can we do better that's going to translate into tangible, real-world, better outcomes for you and your loved one?
Now, I should point out, for those who are familiar with our broadcast and familiar with the department, that you're looking at trends as opposed to one-offs where somebody got moved and their property got misdirected or something, where that's handled by constituent services, which I handled for a number of years and is now handled by Jade Watkin. But you're looking for those trends. So one that I remember that I think we should bring up in terms of trends is when a number of people started calling into the family hotline about medications and prescriptions not getting refilled. And that was something that we noticed was a trend and passed on to you. When things like that occur, right, what's your first step? Where do you go? You say, okay, this process I can see or I'm being told isn't working. Where do you go from there?
Well, we have a number of avenues that exist really for people to express these things. So you mentioned one of them being constituent services or this family hotline. If we're starting to get an influx of calls through that line, and I've had a great coordination and communication relationship with you in that role, and same with Jade moving forward, we can kind of sit back and say, okay, so we're getting a lot of calls on this. We're getting a lot of concerns about this. We also have a stakeholder group that I'm sure we'll talk a little bit more about, where we have loved ones, whole organizations who send representatives to be a part of this dialogue, right? And we start hearing it through there as well. Now it's like, okay, well, we're hearing it from these one-offs. We're hearing it from these organizations. Let's maybe look at directly at our division directors or bureau directors and ask them to run it through their chains and say, hey, have you guys heard about this? Is this something that you're experiencing as well? In the case of the the medication or prescription crisis that we went through, it was, it's a matter of reaching out to clinical services and saying, hey, is this something you guys are hearing? Are you keeping tabs on this? What's going on in your world? Another avenue we have is the grievance system, right? We can go to any one of the 3 levels of the grievance system and kind of take a pulse on how many of those are coming in so you can quantify it. But then you can dig a little deeper there too. You can look at a qualitative, research study essentially, and or even just taking a kind of more casual pulse of what's coming in and taking a couple random selections of different grievances that are coming in and reading through those and saying, okay, is this matching up? Are these different individuals than the ones who are, calling in, or we're getting calls from their family members? Because once you have a selection of rather than like 2 or 3 or 4 people, and now you have a group of 50 or 60 or 70 people, now you're starting to see maybe this is a systemic crisis that we're facing instead of a one-off, individualized type of perspective that's going on here, right? Because I will certainly say, and not to their detriment, but folks will reach out to every single possible channel they possibly can to get results for them individually. So sometimes when we have one person who's facing an issue, they might reach out to their family member. They might reach out to advocacy groups. They might reach out through the grievance system. And now you have one person, and suddenly you have 20, 30 different ways they've reached out or gotten some attention, right? And again, if you're in prison or if you have a loved one in prison, then you want them to get the attention they deserve. You want to make sure their issues are known. So I'm not saying there's anything necessarily wrong with that, but we have some good processes in place, and I think we have some responsive people who want to do the best for those people. So it's that process of going through to determine the volume and the quantity and the number of people impacted by a situation. And once you realize there might be something to this, that can actually give us as a system a little bit of a head start in trying to fix something rather than waiting for it to reach the news media, rather than waiting for it to reach the legislature. There's times where we can actually get ahead of issues and say, okay, let's start identifying and addressing this crisis before people suffer real consequences.
And it's not just crisis, correct? I mean, we've had some challenges in the past here, but you're also looking at just the way things flow, correct? What are the challenges of that? I mean, what are you looking for? What are your triggers that set you out searching for some specific issue?
Well, again, some of it's driven by volume. Some of it's you reach out and you start talking to people, and some people say, hey, my job is actually flowing really well that way, and other people say mine isn't. And then you just put those 2 people together, and suddenly they learn from each other, right? And they say, oh my gosh, I've never really thought of my job that way. Or it opens minds and opens perspectives to just see that the solution's already right there at their fingertips. In other situations through the years, and I used to hold a position that was similar to this operational excellence one. At the time, we called it quality and process improvement. And we worked heavily on taking groups of people who do similar jobs or should be doing similar jobs, and we'd pull them aside and we'd have whole work groups where we'd sit down for hours and just map out the entire process of what their workflow looked like, right? So you create swim lanes and you say, okay, what do I do and who do I hand that job off to when I'm done with it, and what do they do with it? And the beauty of this is not even necessarily the technical tools that are used to accomplish these things. The beauty of it lies in people sitting down in a room together, and for the first time ever in some cases, they talk about the work they do and they talk about the value they add to the entire system. One thing I think that really can drive better outcomes for all of us is if we all understand how our duties individually that we do at work every day come together and gel together into good outcomes. So we can lose sight of that really easily. We can come to work and we can just toil away for any number of hours, and we can go home at the end of the day and say, I'm done, wash my hands of it, right? Alternatively, we can come to work every day and really start to understand or comprehend like the value that we added to individuals' lives, to the entire criminal justice system. And we can identify, here's the department's overall mission, and here's what I did today to advance that. I actually contributed something. When we work in government, I think that people are here for a reason that's usually deeper than job security or money, right? It's usually something where I want to come provide a service to the taxpayers, to the citizens, to whatever outcome it is that I'm driven to work here for, right? There's usually this deeper rooted good or public service that we're providing. And I think it's incumbent on us to help people understand what that is and what their role in that is. So again, taking people out of the just daily grind of their work and coming together and talking about that was extremely eye-opening and is extremely eye-opening. And that's what I really thrive on and hope that the people who participate in these types of conversations thrive on as well.
You mentioned that you had another job here. You've worked for the department for a while in several positions, including communications. What has kept you here? What has kept you going in what can be a challenging and less often rewarding type of career?
It's a great question. And I'll touch briefly on the negative or challenging side of that, and then I'll talk about the why that I've stayed, at least personally. And I think anyone that works for the Department of Corrections or interacts with this in some way has an understanding in general of this, but you get criticism from all sides. Okay, I don't care if you're offering incarcerated people or supervised people every possible service that you could ever imagine and doing everything you can, moving heaven and earth to try to help these folks change. You're going to get someone saying they don't deserve it. Okay, they've wronged society. They don't deserve it. What are you thinking? I don't care if you lock people down and make sure that they're held accountable for the crimes they've committed, treat them harshly or have, no sympathy or empathy. You're going to get criticized by the other side, maybe rightfully so for that, right? You can't have an extremist point of view in any direction with this type of work, right? You've got to be caring, be empathetic, be here for a reason, be compassionate, love second chances, and the idea of the human soul and the ability to change. And at the same time, you have to hold people accountable. You have to realize that people are here with us for a reason, and there are people out in the community that have suffered in some way, shape, or form at the hands of this person. It's an extremely difficult line to walk between those two worlds, and you really have to have a mind that's capable of walking that line and saying, okay, I don't appreciate what you've done in your past, but I have to look forward and I have to hope that there's a different future for you. I have to hope on behalf of the entire general public that I'm here to serve, that you're not going to leave our custody or our supervision and go out there and do something like this again. And I can help make sure that your life is better, that your whole family's life is better, and that the whole public is better because of what we do while you're here. So having said that, I would say what's kept me here, what's kept me driven and on this task through the years has just been the concept of hope, belief in humans and belief in people and belief that we're all after something better ultimately. Sometimes people get selfish about that. Sometimes people think I'm out for what's best for me. But if we step back for a minute and we understand what drives us as a human race, what drives all our peers and everyone to wake up every day and go about life, I think that we find more commonality than we do differences. And it's easy to get caught up along the way in that path to kind of focus on where we differ, right? You feel this way about this issue, I feel this way about this issue. It doesn't matter if we're off by 100 yards or if we're off by a foot, like we're going to focus on that difference sometimes. So being able to step back and ask people just kind of questions that prod them to kind of step back for just a minute and slow down just a minute in their thinking and say, oh my gosh, like we're not so different after all, are we? I think that's been like the most riveting, most life-changing type of thing I've been able to see here. And that's why I'm here. I think it's to help change people for the better, to help change our community for the better, and really just to focus on commonalities.
Now, you get to listen to both sides. You have these stakeholder groups. They're not just folks who are representing those who are incarcerated. They're not just those who are representing the legislature or who want to see stiffer penalties imposed or want fewer people released. Tell me a little bit about these stakeholder groups and what your philosophy, what the department's philosophy is in working with them.
Well, I think interestingly through the years, and I'll step back from that question just momentarily to talk about the broader context I think we've all witnessed and been a part of. I think historically, I started here nearly 15 years ago, working in the communications realm, and I think we saw an interest in what we did in corrections, but the level of interest has changed through the years, and I think there's become a more deeper-rooted expectation that we open our doors and that we really explain to people exactly what goes on here. People saw us back in the day as maybe a black box a bit, like they cared about the crime that was committed. They cared that there was a court process that got that person held accountable for that crime or got the person, innocence was found and the person was exonerated and the justice system played out, right? Beyond that, there wasn't a whole lot of interest or care about the post-conviction, post-sentencing process, right? That we knew that person had been found guilty or found innocent, and we knew that there was a process to play out. Either they went on and lived their life or they went to prison, and that was the end of the story, right? It's like watching a Disney movie, right? The person, gets married at the end or whatever, is happily ever after. There's no chores. There's no raising kids.
I'd never heard prison compared to Disney, but I get the point.
In essence, it's just, it's changed. It's now people care about what happens in that black box. They care about the daily ins and outs. It's kind of fascinating. You've got shows on Netflix. We have Orange is the New Black in recent years. We've got shows every day about the curiosity of what goes on, these locked up type shows. And there's an appetite now. There's a hunger to know, and then beyond knowing, to second guess and kind of dig deeper. And so I think more than ever, it's our responsibility to not only carry out those daily tasks and do what we're expected to do, but also do it in a very transparent, upfront manner. It doesn't even just mean answering questions when they come to us. That means putting out more information proactively, giving people opportunities to engage with the system and provide feedback. And that's really what the stakeholder group is about. So I'll move on to answering your question more directly now, but I think without an avenue for people to come express concerns, to come ask questions in a very open, public manner, we invite people to take their concerns elsewhere, to take them to the picket lines, to protest, to say no one's listening to me and no one's hearing what I have to say. Even if we had avenues to some extent set up to take one-off calls and everything, it's different to talk about systemic issues and things that need to be changed on a deeper rooted level, right? And quite frankly, the biggest impact to me personally as the person who's kind of facilitating that group has been really gaining this understanding of we think we know what the issue is. Every single day we come to work thinking we know what our priorities are. And whether it's once a month or whether it's every time I receive an email from one of these organizations that are part of our stakeholder group, I start to open my eyes and realize, wow, we might be focusing on the wrong thing here, right? Because the real world impacts of what we do, that's what our eyes should be on, right? If we're able to effectively change lives, if people are able to come into our system and better themselves, and if we're holding those people back, it certainly isn't our intention. I would say, it's sometimes a side effect of decisions we've made or kind of us spinning our wheels trying to make sure we make the right decisions, but progress is kind of stagnant because we're trying to make sure that we get things just right. And this reminder that in the meantime, while we're making all these decisions and while we're trying to better the system, people are either moving forward or backward, right? They're either progressing with their lives, progressing in change, or they're moving backwards and degressing. So the stakeholder group just very much in a tangible way is able to bring those real stories to the forefront. They're able to say, look, I've got a mother who can't get in touch with their son and she's wondering what's going on. We've heard stories of, this, that, or the other happening. And when you start to collect those stories and collect individual circumstances, and I go back to that volume, you realize this is 20 or 30 or 40 or 50 people and not just one or two people. Even though every person matters, you start to realize there's systemic things that we need to look at. And the stakeholder group is able to not only bring those to the table, but then they're expected to come to us with some solutions or some proposals. And that's the beauty of this too, is we can't assume just because we have worked in the system and we know the system that we are the only ones with answers. Some of these issues are so intractable and they've been around for so many years that they take creative thinking. We have to think outside of the box and we have to innovate. And in order to do that, we have to bring in every mind that we can possibly bring in, whether it's someone with a PhD who's a professor and an expert, or whether it's someone who has known 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 people in prison before and they know the real world impacts, they know the experiences. Like, you start to blend those two worlds and suddenly you get somewhere.
I know one of the challenges that I had when I was doing constituent services, and still do to some extent, was filtering the noise, filtering emotions out from those who are relaying whatever, the exaggerations, whatever it was that they were trying to do in an effort to get whatever it was they were looking for. How do you filter? How do you filter out the noise to get to the fact of what's real, what's going on?
Yeah, that can be extremely complicated. I think that there's a balance there to be had for sure. There's a huge value in keeping in touch with people that have realistic perspectives from working inside the institutions or working on supervision for years as well. They certainly know the individuals we're talking about, and they certainly are able to filter through some of the what's real and what's exaggerated in a way that really sometimes the people who are bringing these issues to us don't know. I mean, I often can't blame organizations or groups that come to us and say, there's this, showstopper of an issue going on. You guys need to fix it right away. And then you check into it and you're like, well, I've found otherwise because I've read documents, I've read case notes, I've read whatever it is, right? And I know from documentation and from talking to numerous people that this is not quite the experience that you're sharing. However, I must say that when that occurs and we have groups bringing those things to our attention, you kind of do your best to explain that without painting the person as a liar or a manipulator. And you explain the full context of what we're trying to do. And you have to be grateful for the fact that they are willing to raise that to your attention because were it not for them being willing to do so, we could have had some extremely catastrophic situation on our hands, right? And they have no ability in most situations to go through and screen the facts in these cases or to read the documents that I'm reading or that we're capable of possessing and looking through, right? So you have to understand that. And I see it the same way. You receive an email from a constituent that says that so-and-so is suffering a heart attack and is on their deathbed. It doesn't matter if it's 10 a.m. or 10 p.m. It doesn't matter if it's 2 p.m. or 2 a.m. You act, you jump on that, because you don't want to be that link that dropped the ball and caused a person to not get the help that they needed. So you have to treat every one of those as a major, a real factual situation. And when you find otherwise, in my mind, you don't react with anger, with frustration. You don't turn callous. You just have to simply continue to check because all it takes is one of these situations being a real, non-embellished situation. And that's, you've done, put it on the back burner and now someone's life is at stake, right? So it is an extremely difficult dance, but I would say the only way that you can go through that and screen those and really come to a conclusion is by asking questions and by researching and by reading documentation and being tireless in your pursuit of facts and truth along the way.
And, in the interest of transparency, you and I have been on the phone at 10:30 at night talking about scenarios that have come up and how we can best address them. So I know for a fact that what you just said is wholly accurate. Personally speaking, you deal with a lot. You have a lot of folks who believe that their loved ones, whatever perspective it is, whatever trauma they're going through at that time, is systemic. Even if it's not, how do you deal with that personally, right? Something happened to somebody else. You're human. You're feeling that. For you, though, it's on a elevated basis because you're getting that in a volume that's ever increasing. How do you deal with all of that personally with your own emotions?
That's a good question. I think, I'll admit that in a former life, much like you, I was a member of the media. I was a reporter. You were taught to go and to be a fly on the wall and to reflect what you're seeing, to not insert yourself. And over the years, I think I actually ended up leaving that line of work in part because I was starting to feel my emotions slip. I was starting to feel like when these things did happen in a very real way in my personal life, like, am I emotional enough? Am I taking this in and actually reacting the way that a human being should, right? So that's the danger, I think. I think if you remove yourself from a situation to the extent that you're not willing and able to go feel and to go tear up and to laugh and to get angry, you're not having a human experience. And I say this to you as I'm tearing up because I'm thinking about these things, right? I'm thinking about life. And the real human experience, I think, inherently involves us being vulnerable, being willing to go and to experience life and to say to someone who's going through something, I'm sorry, and beyond sympathizing, being capable of empathizing with them. And empathy inherently involves us having tragedy. So it brings to the forefront of my mind my own past tragedies or even future things I could go through. You have to be capable of putting yourself in someone else's shoes and saying, man, what is this person experiencing? How would I feel if I had a 30-year-old son, a 20-year-old brother who feels helpless, And that's why you dig, and that's why you ask questions. You trust the staff that you know and you build relationships with, and you know that they're here to do good. And you go and ask those questions and you find out, what is this person actually experiencing? What is their life? What has their life been up to now? What are we capable of helping their life become in the future? But every one of those stories that comes to you is an entire life. It's a bigger picture than the little snapshot that we get while they're with us. And if we aren't willing to go out on a limb and to put ourselves in their shoes and to say to ourselves, like, what if this was me? When have I felt this way? When could I ever feel this way? I've got, a young family, and I know that their growth and their evolution and everything comes with challenges. And I do everything possible in my power to set them up for success rather than failure. But I know as a parent, I talk to these people every day who are parents, and some of them did every single possible thing they could and offered their child everything they could to succeed in life, and they still ended up with us. So maybe they just need some help. Maybe it was a setback in their life and they're still capable of getting there, right? But we play a part in that equation. So we need to be understanding. We need to be empathetic, and we need to put ourselves in those shoes. It's extremely difficult, especially when that's the volume you referenced. You're getting all these calls, all these experiences on a routine basis. It'd be much easier to kind of shut your emotions out and just take it as what it is and click forward and move on with your day, right? But that's often the most painstaking and painful part, is just knowing that every one of these situations is a human life. And I think that we have a number of staff and people throughout our agency who are doing everything they can every single day to help these folks change and evolve and have a better future. And sometimes it's just as frustrating for them because they wish they had more services. They wish they had more to offer people than they actually have. And that's why it's so important to become more excellent every day, because that entails, compiling more services, reaching out. And beyond the stakeholder group, we talk about us being responsible for almost every aspect of folks' lives. When they're leaving prison, when they're going back out in the community, they have an entire life that they have to restart. That involves jobs, that involves housing, that involves making sure they stay off any sort of substances, making sure they can create positive mentorships and friendships and things like that to get their life in a positive trajectory. And we Can we do all that as a Department of Corrections? I don't know. Are we going to be held accountable for doing all that? We probably will. So we have to figure out a way to establish those relationships and to do that outreach and to make sure that we're wrapping our arms around these folks and giving them the possibility that they have. They have to be the one to take advantage of that in a positive way. They have to be the one to, to go out and really make the effort and to carry those things out into fruition and change their lives. But we can help them, and we can establish those relationships to give them a better future if we try.
What's one of the things that you're focusing on right now, that you're trying to improve?
One thing we've already seen some positive outcomes around, and it's not anything that really is necessarily, the organizational, very top of the organization that's reached out and established this. It's come from people who just want to make positive change down on housing units in the prison even. So there's groups of people that have gotten together and approached groups of incarcerated individuals and said, hey, you guys clearly have ideas. You're going to school, you're bettering yourselves, you live in the prison system too. Let's actually sit down and have a conversation. Let's listen to what you have to offer to us. So one thing we're looking at is expanding that concept of sort of focus groups because feedback is so key. I mean, we talk about communicating with people and pushing out information all the time. Like everything we're doing as a department, let's push that out. Let's push it out to the incarcerated population, to the supervised population, of course, to our own staff. Let's push that out to the legislature. Let's push that out to the public. Let's get information out about what we're doing and all the things we're trying to do at once. But one thing I think that's important to not lose sight of is collecting information, listening. Communication is a two-way street, and if we're not listening, then we're missing a lot of potential, right? So going and approaching people and saying, we want to collect your real-world experiences. What is it that's happening to you? What is it that you're taking part of in here? What is it that you need more of? What is it that's just maybe even minutia that could change and make your life just like exponentially better, right? So I'll give you an example of one story I heard where this happened was in Dell. I know Captain Jake Romero down there, I was just talking to him the other day. They've talked to the incarcerated female population there about some things that would better their lives, and something as simple as storage. We need locks on our storage, something that's safe that people can still check, but we're not going to have our stuff stolen. We don't have to worry about that every day. We need, separate bags for separate purposes and things like that. Something as simple as storage. I mean, for you or I, we could run over to IKEA and 12 hours later after we assemble it and hammer our thumb 5 or 6 times, we have something that we can store stuff in, right? Maybe I speak for only myself in that experience, but it's not so simple when every aspect of your life is very structured and very controlled, and you're in that kind of environment. And we have to be understanding of that. They have to be understanding there's a purpose to all that. We have to articulate what that purpose is, and we have to make sure we have a secure environment, of course. But along the way, there's a human experience happening amidst all that, right? And we can either make that a positive or a negative experience. And if we make it a negative experience, if we either go out of our way to make it a negative experience, or if we simply turn off our ears and don't listen about legitimate things that are coming back to us, then it's going to be a negative experience. If we go about our jobs with a spirit of, communication, collaboration, coordination, and treat people as human beings and listen and expect them to do the same for us, then we're getting somewhere, right? So I think that's one of the things that excites me the most is rolling out this more exhaustive kind of model of focus groups and feedback loops and listening to people and really taking from their experience to shape how we're going to progress in the future.
And if people want to be part of these focus groups or stakeholder groups, how would they go about doing that?
I'd say the easiest way is just to get in touch directly with me. I mean, I know that it can be daunting to just reach out and have a personal interaction these days, but that's all it takes, honestly. Like, I'll be very responsive. I'll respond to texts or emails or whatever the case may be. My email is available, but it's sgehrke, SGEHRKE at utah.gov, and I'm happy to make sure everyone feels included and feels a part of the process. It's exciting to me anytime anyone wants to be involved in something bigger. I think that's indicative of a really positive outlook in life, is when you want to take your own experiences and and ensure that if they're good ones, then everyone has the opportunity to experience those. If they're bad ones, make sure that we can learn from those and minimize the number of times that has to occur to anyone else. So all of us go through experiences. All of us have the potential for changing ourselves and changing everyone around us for the better. So I'm super enthusiastic about anyone that wants to become a part of that.
Well, Steve, those were all the questions I had. Was there anything you'd like to share before we go?
Yeah, I think the last thing I would say is just the underlying kind of vein among all this stuff that we've talked about is just, again, positive things. I may be Pollyanna, but let's hope and understanding, sharing, vulnerability. We have to advance as a society, as a department, as a state, everything that you could think of. We have to advance in a spirit of understanding, of coordination, of collaboration. And if we step back, we're going to see more commonalities among all of us than we'll see differences. And I understand that this work is extremely daunting, and it's not usually characterized by words like hope and those type of things. Often we get mired in these quagmires of, just the dirt and the griminess of everything that goes on. And you focus on what you focus on, and that becomes your story. That becomes your human experience. So I just encourage everyone to go out on a limb and take that dangerous leap of focusing on hope and prosperity and change and making sure that becomes a contagious thing. So I appreciate the opportunity to chat with you, and I love working here, and I love being a part of this department.
Well, Steve, thank you very much. I know you're exceptionally busy, but I really do appreciate you spending the time to come talk with us. And for everybody else, thank you for joining us on Conversations with Corrections.
This has been Conversations with Corrections from the Utah Department of Corrections. These podcasts are on our website at corrections.utah.gov or on the UDC YouTube page. Suggestions for a future topic can be sent to corrections@utah.gov. Thank you for joining us.